He's a man of many talents, comedian, martial artist, broadcaster, podcast host. But the one thing that ties most of these skills together is the sharp tongue and quick wit of the veteran fight caller that is Joe Rogan. With that in mind, we're going to take a look at 10 of the most savage moments involving one of the most famous faces on the planet today. Let's get into it. Number 10. Don't ruin my shot. Anyone who knows anything about Joe Rogan will know that he is especially abrasive with those of us who display anything resembling laziness or carelessness. And during one infamous moment during a UFC broadcast, Rogan and his old colleague Mike Goldberg were casually discussing the ins and outs of something fight-related when some random member of what we presume to be UFC staff managed to get into the shot. Rogan, being Rogan, pushed the unseen disturbance out of his shot before taking a moment to take a shot at the man in question once Goldie had finished whatever he was saying. To say, nothing similar has ever happened under Rogan's watchful eye. He might not look it on the surface, but as you can imagine, Joe Rogan would be a pretty scary guy to cross, especially if he's on the job. Number 9. Straightening out Brian Callen. Brian Callen is a longtime friend of Joe Rogan and a man who truly splits people down the middle. A veteran of the comedy scene who came up around the same time as Rogan, his constant appearances on the Joe Rogan's podcast alongside his friend and co-host Brendan Schaub are episodes you truly either love or hate. And though Callen has his own controversies to overcome in recent times, one memorable episode of the Joe Rogan Experience saw both Rogan and Schaub take him out to school due to his tendency to act hard around his friends.
You could try, and guess what?
Just because it's the nice
Guess
Saturday.
what? I would f***ing come right to your house. Bang,
No,
bang,
it's
bang.
No, you'd be dead.
Joe.
Would I?
Yep.
He needs friends like us because he gets
Yeah.
around saying that with
Well,
guys who don't know.
Well,
can't
he
wait to
hangs
box
around
today.
with
I
a
can't wait.
lot of idiots. There's a lot of people that he hangs around with that are
notoriously known
full
for
of
that.
shit.
Oh, God.
That they're dumb. They're
Look at Brendan.
indulgent.
Look
I
at
feel
Brendan
sick.
agree.
I feel sick.
Look at
You
Brendan
do.
agree.
I feel sick.
You do. You hang out with a lot of people that are such bullshit artists.
Trust us, this won't be the last time some harsh truths have been dished out on the biggest podcasting platform in the world. All in all, it seemed like the type of conversation that could have easily happened behind closed doors. We're pretty happy it didn't. Number 8. 10-9 Goldberg. Sure, this is a list of Rogan's savage moments, but this entry here is an exchange shared between Rogan and his longtime co-commentator Mike Goldberg that saw both men having their moments, with Goldie possibly getting the upper hand. After receiving a very heavy plug on the UFC broadcast for his upcoming comedy special, Rogan engaged with Goldberg in a playful back and forth where Joe commended his colleague on his ability to be funny without realizing it, which was, of course, his own opening dig, before Goldberg called him the single greatest comedian on the planet. When Joe attempted to humbly say that he didn't believe that to be true, Goldie said the same thing before reminding Joe that he can, in fact, be funny. We know, it's not primarily a Joe Rogan moment, but give us a break, it's pure comedy gold. Number 7. Cutting the BS. The UFC debut of the future champion Jon Jones was memorable for many reasons. First of all, it obviously showcased one of the greatest fighters of all time in a very early stage of his career. The man was as athletic as they came, but at this point, he was a very reckless, unrefined 21-year-old, and even though he won the bout, he hadn't yet set the world aright. What was pretty hilarious from Joe Rogan in this bout, however, was that during the fighters' intros in the opening seconds of the first round, as Goldberg said Jones black trunks, Guzman white trunks, Rogan decided to point out that saying Jones black guy, Guzman white guy was a much more streamlined way of delivering the information. Goldie kept it dry and funny in his response, but in that moment, a hilariously blunt Joe Rogan was born, just as much as the new prospect at 205 pounds was born in Jon Jones. Number 6. Met his match. You never do know what you'll be in for when you accept a question from a random fan member at a media event. And for Joe Rogan, any feeling of getting the upper hand likely dissolved quickly after his opponent revealed his full hand. The man in question challenged Joe to a wrestling match, something Rogan quickly countered for a big laugh, telling the fan to get up here. When pushed to tell Joe what he would stand to lose if the commentator could tap him out, the fan in question delivered one of the all-time best comebacks you'll hear in any piece of UFC content.
What happens if you tap? That's all I want to know. What do I get?
I black out before I tap out.
Safe to say, just as much as Rogan was sharp and savage in his own comeback, this one right here was yet another case of him being beaten soundly by the closing bell. The fan in question was never heard from again, and of course, Joe went on to achieve global success and a 9-figure net worth. So if you want to call that a moral victory, then be my guest. Remember, if you're enjoying our content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Number 5. Taking on CNN. Rogan's stance on COVID-19 and its many different facets has made him a target of many different attacks from reputable news websites in recent times. His own successful treatment of the virus with the medicine known as ivermectin caused many media outlets to accuse him of recklessly promoting alternative medicine forms that could potentially be dangerous. Chief among these outlets was CNN. And Joe, being Joe, decided the best course of action would be to invite CNN's Sanjay Gupta onto the biggest podcast on the planet and ask him to break down exactly what his and his team's problem was with what Rogan did. The resulting interview is a fascinating debate that sees Joe completely and utterly prove his point. Even Sanjay himself was forced to admit that his network were pushing out false information in the reports on Rogan, and overall, you have to feel as though his plan completely backfired.
They said, you are not a horse, you are not a cow, stop taking this stuff, or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it making winning the Nobel Prize in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, a drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker. This is ridiculous.
Not everyone changed their mind about Rogan after this podcast, but it certainly went a long way in clearing his name. Number 4. The Carlos Mencia incident. One of the more infamous incidents involving Mr. Rogan came during an appearance by the comedian Carlos Mencia at Joe's usual spot, the Comedy Store. Mencia, who was quite the star at the time, had been accused by Rogan in the past of stealing jokes from other comedians, something Mencia himself had denied vehemently. The origin of this feud came when Joe made a lengthy post to his official website, completely ripping on Mencia and accusing him of being a fraud on many different levels. However, on this night, Joe wasn't prepared to let things slide. In the middle of Carlos's set, he took to the stage and began publicly shaming him for his plagiarism, telling everyone in the venue exactly what he thought about it.
If someone steals a riff from a song, that shit's in the news constantly. Motherfuckers steal shit and make it on HBO. They steal shit and put it on television. What are you saying?
Later dives into Mencia's material over the years would confirm multiple instances of joke stealing, and for Joe, this was certainly one of his most infamous moments of savagery. Number 3. Shots fired at Chris Cyborg. Both Rogan and UFC president Dana White found themselves in a spot of real controversy when they each took some incredibly mean-spirited jabs at Chris Cyborg a few years back. At the time, Cyborg had yet to sign with the UFC and was still knocking out all comers under the Strikeforce banner. Dana, who was never afraid to take shots at fighters from other promotions, proceeded to ridicule the Brazilian champion for looking like a female Wanderlei Silva, taking to his feet to do a beastish impression of her for a group of stunned media members. Rogan, on the other hand, hosted an episode of his podcast alongside the UFC prez, and during one infamous moment, they proceeded to rip into the featherweight legend, with Joe making a comment about Cyborg possessing men's genitalia that instantly got him in trouble with the masses.
Before you have Cyborg have her first fight in the UFC, have Tony roast her.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I don't even know where I'd begin. Where would I start? Probably
her dick.
She's the only person that cuts weight by chopping off her dick.
He would later make an apology for getting caught up in the conversation. But to this day, Cyborg's relationship with two of the most prominent men in the UFC isn't exactly in the best place. And all things considered, it's pretty understandable if she isn't ready to extend the olive branch. Number 2. Tough love. Sometimes a good friend will deliver difficult news to you about yourself in order to help you in the long run. Other times, they will give you a healthy dose of tough love to ensure you don't make any serious mistakes. For Joe Rogan, helping his good friend Brendan Schaub amounted to him completely tearing him down a few notches on an episode of one of the most popular podcasts in the world. Seriously, Rogan is that good of a friend. No, we joke. In truth, it was a pretty embarrassing moment for Schaub, as his friend, without warning, used one of the biggest platforms on the internet to ask him very tough questions about the future of his fighting career. Schaub, who was on a pretty patchy run of form at the time, had just been knocked out in brutal fashion by Travis Brown. And Joe, being Joe, decided that the time was perfect to engage in an on-air conversation about his limitations as a UFC heavyweight.
I worry about your commitment to fighting, and I worry about where you stand, not your commitment to training. Not your commitment to training, not your commitment to give it your all. I think you have one foot out the door. I think you're looking. You disagree? Mm-hmm. I think you're looking at where the future is going to take you, and that you can't do this forever. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be in fighting.
Try as Brandon did to fight his case, Rogan fairly conclusively shut him down every turn. And sure enough, a few moments later, Schaub had officially announced his retirement from the sport, and in the years since, has focused primarily on his stand-up comedy and work as a podcaster. Whether you love or hate his work, it's pretty clear that the levels of his success speak for themselves. Number 1. A friend's birthday. Hecklers are just plain annoying. There's no other way to put it. And for this one unfortunate lady who decided to speak up during Rogan's stand-up routine, the resulting put-down was one that most likely made her immediately regret her decision. Not only did Joe pause the set to make sure he had heard exactly what the heckler in question had to say, but after she replied that it was her friend's birthday, Rogan proceeded to go full savage, doing a hilarious impression of the lady in question, much to the amusement of everyone who was in the attendance.
No, it's not! Born 26 fucking years ago! Tell her to get over it!
The lesson here? If you pay good money to attend a comedy show, let the comedian in question do his or her job, even if you do happen to be wasted drunk. Thankfully, Rogan has made quite a habit of punishing outbursts like this, producing numerous viral clips each year. And that will just about do it for this video. Again, if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.